Welcome to the Get Fit Guys, quick and dirty tips to get moving and shape up. My name is Brock Armstrong, and I'm the Get Fit Guy. Good range of motion is the key to living a mobile, active, and fit life. But range of motion can decrease after an injury or simply as we age. So today's guest expert, Shane Dowd, joins me to talk about the 3 exercise pillars that will help you get and stay fit and flexible. Shane Dowd, the guest on this episode, is a certified massage practitioner, a strength and conditioning coach, and a corrective exercise specialist. And he's the CEO and founder of GotROM.com. And Shane is, well, truly passionate about, or maybe even obsessed with, keeping your body moving at its best. You see, 11 years ago, Shane was told that his hips were so messed up that they needed surgery, and the X-rays and MRIs confirmed it. He was told, "You're screwed, son. Get the surgery before it gets worse." Well, he didn't listen, and he's glad he didn't. Now he believes almost anything is possible when you upgrade your passion to an obsession. And Shane is obsessed with helping people who are injured or simply getting older get and stay fit. You know, a few months ago, I was getting frustrated with my deep squat. That's the kind of squat where you can just sit and chill out with your butt right near the ground and your heels planted firmly beneath you. I've been working on and off for years to make my squat more comfortable, and after some initial success, I plateaued. So, when I heard about Shane's website, I signed up for his 45-day program to master deep squats. I was so impressed with his approach and my results that I knew I needed to have Shane on the podcast so we could nerd out all about range of motion. That's the ROM part of Got ROM. So here we go with the nerd out session between me and Shane. Okay, I'm here with Shane Dowd, and I'm going to start with, Shane, what is ROM, or range of motion, and why is it so important?
Basically, in plain English, it's the range of motion of the joints of your body, or your whole body as a whole. So, you need range of motion to do anything in life. If you're going to bend down to pick something up, you need a certain amount of hamstring flexibility or hip range of motion. If you're going to climb up something, use your arms, you need a certain amount of range of motion. Every sport has range of motion requirements. If you're a jiu-jitsu athlete, you need a certain amount of hip range of motion to play your sport. Every sport requires range of motion, and just even if you're not an athlete, daily life requires some degree of flexibility, some degree of range of motion.
Yeah, that actually leads really well into what I was going to ask next, which is this something that only a jiu-jitsu kind of person needs to worry about? But you did say that just picking something up off the ground requires a certain range of motion. So this really sounds like it's something that applies to a broad part of the population, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, unless you're someone who has no need to ever sit down, even sitting down requires range of motion. I mean, in our modern life, all our chairs are higher and our toilets are higher and you can get around it. Like I've even seen some ads for like a hand. It's like a big stick with like a pincher on the end. And if you can't physically reach the floor, you can buy this stick and kind of like pick things up. But obviously that's not ideal. We'd all love that our bodies can move freely enough and they have enough range of motion to pick up our kids, pick up the groceries, reach up and get something out of the cupboard. All of that, even if you have zero athletic aspirations, requires range of motion.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think a lot of people, and myself included, often think of losing your range of motion due to age, but you're saying it can also just be due to modern conveniences of everyday life.
Yeah, totally. It's the if you don't use it, you lose it principle. So we live in a society where, for example, we sit in chairs most of the time, like I'm doing right now. We don't often sit in a full squat. I saw one of your videos on YouTube where you were practicing a squat in the woods. And that's a really healthy thing for people to do, because if you don't do that regularly, you will eventually lose that range of motion. And then you won't be able to do things that you really want to do, like pick up your grandchild or tie your own shoelaces, or, anyone who's lost the ability to do that recognizes the importance of that. But the loss of range of motion comes on slow. It's like a slow, insidious freezing up of the body. But with just some stretches and some exercises and some regular movement, you don't have to lose those key ranges of motion.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, but I have to credit you with the video that I did of me squatting in the forest. My squat was not that good until I actually did one of your programs. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, and we'll touch on that later. But I did want to bring up the fact that a lot of the stuff that appears on your website and that we equate with a loss of range of motion, we often think of it having more to do with things like injuries or something that's happened to us suddenly. But is that true? Is that where we should be focused, or is there a better way to actually look at this?
Yeah, it happens. It happens both ways. I mean, if I just look at my own life as an example, if I look at my mom and dad or grandma and grandpa, and most of us, if we look at that, you can see how they kind of get stiffer and tighter over time. And then that limits them and starts to either cause their pain or cause them to compensate because they, for example, they can't get all the way down to touch the floor. And so they start rounding their back even more, and they end up hurting their back. And they might attribute it to, say, a weak back or something like that. But when really it was a range of motion, a flexibility problem, they weren't moving in the right places. So it can be something that happens traumatically all at once, like you suffer a knee injury somehow playing your sport or something, and then a lot of range of motion is lost immediately after a traumatic injury. Or it can be a slow onset kind of thing where you just haven't used those ranges of motion in years and years and years. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like the weekend warrior common story where like someone hasn't gone out to play Frisbee or play basketball, and then they try to get back into it, but they haven't used those ranges of motion in so long that they're taking their body beyond what it's capable of. So it can either happen all at once really fast after an injury, or it can creep up on you over 20, 30, 40 years.
So the one way is really easy to recognize. Obviously, we're going to notice when we get injured, even if we're just shoveling the walk and turn our knee the wrong way and do something bad to it. But how do we recognize that we're starting to lose the range of motion if it doesn't happen in one disastrous moment? That's
a great question. It's basically having a movement practice, having some practice, whether it be yoga, whether it just be a few sequence of stretches that you learn from me or from someone else or online or whatever, but just taking your body through some key ranges or some key patterns like squatting, like bending over to pick things up, like raising your arm up over your head, whether you're doing it with or without weights, putting your hands behind your back. You need to, like for women to be able to, take off their bra if they're changing or something, you need to be able to have shoulder extension and internal rotation. You don't need to know that that's the ranges that you need. You just need to know, I need to put my hand behind my back sometimes.
Yeah.
So having a movement practice where you take your body through full ranges of motion will allow you to catch earlier when in fact you're getting tighter and losing flexibility and range of motion.
Yeah, I guess arguably that movement practice that you're talking about would have been filled by everyday life in past generations where we had to work a little bit harder, or we weren't necessarily, again, using the modern conveniences that are currently making us more and more sedentary right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I did your deep squatting program, and I was really surprised. First of all, it was great, and I've really improved my squat, but I've still got some distance to go, but I am turning 50 this year, and I definitely did the old if you don't use it, you lose it thing. But I was really surprised during the program by how much of it was actually soft tissue work, like foam rolling, and even more aggressive than foam rolling, using things like barbells and stuff to roll out the soft tissue. And there wasn't all that much of actually getting into a squat, at least at first.
Yeah.
Now, why do you spend so much time working on the soft tissue?
A lot of the people who are interested in a deep squats program are usually athletes, a CrossFitter, a bodybuilder, a powerlifter, an Olympic weightlifter, some team sport athlete.
Ballet dancer.
Yeah,
ex-ballet dancer.
And they often do lots of squats in their training. So they're taking their body through that range of motion, but where they need a little bit of help is oftentimes they're doing it with compensation. So for example, they're trying to get in a really deep squat as a powerlifter or a CrossFitter or Olympic weightlifter. And they're getting deep into the squat, but with a huge amount of lumbar flexion, which is your low back rounding and kind of tucking under, your pelvis posteriorly tilting, which just kind of looks like your back rounds at the bottom of your squat. And in exercise culture, they call it the butt wink, which just means your pelvis is tucking under, which is not that bad unloaded. But when you start adding a bunch of weight and speed and effort into that, then that can create a lot of shearing forces on the spine and stuff like that. So the reason that we have a lot of self-massage and stretching in the 45-day deep squats program is because we assume people are going to be doing their squatting in the gym when they're lifting their weights or playing their sport. And what they need to do is get some muscle extensibility, some range of motion via massaging the muscles, like chewing them up, like chewing the bubble gum up, and then stretching it because it stretches better after you chew it up. And we do recommend that you at least for like 5 minutes a day, you get in a squat-like position and just kind of play around just to kind of keep greasing the groove, keep lubricating the joints, keep accessing those ranges of motion. So yeah, you got to do tissue work and stretching to access the new ranges. And then you should cement those new ranges, meaning like keep them with your weightlifting routine or the other parts of your movement practice.
Right. That's where the idea for my squatting video actually came from, was just grabbing onto a tree and spending some time in the squatting position. And I found myself doing that more and more because your program really encouraged me to spend some more time in that position. But like you said, the soft tissue work was really important for me too, especially as somebody who's almost 50 years old with a history of sports and athletics. I had a lot of adhesions, some scar tissue, some injuries that have been lingering for years. So addressing those was really key to getting that range of motion back.
Yeah. And that's super critical because a lot of people are familiar with, like, if you ask the average person, like, how do you get flexible? They'll say stretch or go do yoga or something.
Yeah.
Which is true, but it's missing in my mind a key component, which is the tissue work, which is, like I said earlier, chewing the bubble gum up before you stretch it can make the stretching much more comfortable and much more effective. Like for some people like myself, when I first started stretching, it was like painful and like felt like my hips were grinding and just everything hurt about it. And when I learned how to do really targeted soft tissue work prior to the stretching, it just made the stretching much more comfortable. And a lot of people who maybe are getting older or, like you said, have a lot of scar tissue, like old injuries that have just never, like when you pull a muscle or tear something, the muscle doesn't just perfectly reform just brand new as it was before. It forms like a little scar ball. And if you have never gotten in there and kind of softened it up and chewed it up, it can't really realign as it did as a nice, healthy, young muscle. And so that soft tissue work is extra critical for some people. And for some people, it's not as necessary. Like maybe if you're younger or you don't have a lot of muscle mass and density, like you're not an athlete, maybe like a very slim, young female yogi might not need all that tissue work because just stretching gets them the range of motion that they want. And that's fine. And that's why there's room to customize and inform your own routine. But I do find that for the majority of people, tissue work plus stretching is better than stretching alone.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely added a lot more of that to my evening routine. Generally, when I'm watching TV or watching a hockey game or something like that, I'll get down on the floor and be stretching away. But now I've got the stick thing and I'll just go to town rolling out my Achilles or getting in there on my shins. And that's a real sore spot for me. Yeah. So it's definitely become part of that routine. Okay. I think a lot of the listeners out there are probably thinking, yeah, when I reach out for something or when I'm picking something up off the ground, it's starting to cause a little bit of difficulty and it's actually getting in the way of me enjoying my life. So that leads me to ask you, if someone out there is thinking, yeah, I've noticed this lack of range of motion and it's impacting my life, what can they do right away to start addressing these issues?
I would say that there's like three main things that they should start to explore. We've already touched on two of them, the tissue work and the stretching, because they'll teach you different things. Like I might stretch and it feels kind of normal, but then I go and do a massage on my shoulder and all of a sudden I find out that there's like all these knots and trigger points and densities in my left shoulder. And when I massage my right shoulder, they're not there. But when I stretch, it feels relatively the same. So it's like some of your things that could cause you pain can hide. And just stretching might not reveal those things to you. So include in your movement practice, whatever that looks like, some stretching. I've got hundreds of free videos on my YouTube channel that you can check out. Include some tissue work, some self-massage, and include some strengthening. That's kind of the third pillar in what I teach. And I think that if you are massaging your body, stretching it, and strengthening it, you'll be a lot wiser than someone who's just doing one of those things. Like the person who's just the yogi who just always stretches, when they try to go do something strength-based, they discover some gaps in their game. They discover some problems that could lead to pain or injuries or something going wrong. Similarly, the big buff, weightlifter guy who really has the strengthening side of things taken care of, but he's never massaged his body and never has stretched his body, will learn how tight he is. And with just a little bit of education, will realize how that tightness can lead to injuries, which will take him out of the game, and he won't be able to do his sport or lift those weights, because when you're sitting on the sidelines injured, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So I would say tissue work, stretching, and strengthening included in your movement practice will be some of the best ways to discover where you might have something lurking that could harm you down the road.
Right. All right. And you mentioned that you have lots of videos, and I've seen a few of them on your YouTube channel, but what's the best way to find more information about you and get some help from you?
You can go to GotROM, GOTROM.com, GotROM.com. ROM is range of motion, is what it stands for. Or just search GotROM on YouTube, or my name, Shane Dowd, on YouTube. And I've got all kinds of videos, blogs, articles. If you just Google GotROM or Shane Dowd, you'll come across what you need. And what's really cool about YouTube and Google, just search engines in general, is you can search like GotROM shoulder, GotROM back, GotROM hip mobility, GotROM hamstring flexibility. And I've got tons of videos in like every category that you could think of, programs for all of those if you're someone who wants like a structured 30 or 45 day kind of plan. And yeah, you can find videos and playlists and articles and all kinds of free stuff.
Nice. Well, that's wonderful, Shane. Thank you. And thanks for coming on the Get Fit Guy podcast. I know everybody out there is going to be looking you up and addressing their range of motions.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. I'd like to thank Shane one more time for coming on the Get Fit Guy podcast. It was great having him here, and make sure to check out his website at gotrom.com. That's GOTROM.com. And one more thing, don't stop listening yet. I want to let you know about a free workshop that I'm doing with Monica Reinagel, otherwise known as the Nutrition Diva, on April 6th. It doesn't really matter how much you know, it's what we do most consistently that creates results. And Monica and I have developed a 3-step approach to behavior change, and it is the central organizing principle of everything that we do in our Way Less program, which is about to start. And on April 6th, we're going to share with you the magic. Well, okay, maybe it's not quite magic, but we're going to share with you the attention, intention, action cycle. That once you leverage all 3 of these essential parts, well, there's almost nothing you can't do. So head over to wayless.life/3step, that's the number 3, STEP, and you can sign up for this free webinar on April 6th. That's wayless.life/3step. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. My name is Brock Armstrong. I'm the Get Fit Guy, asking you, what are you waiting for? Get out there and address your range of motion.